I took the job because my life had collapsed in a way that wasn't dramatic enough to make a good story. No affair, no crime, no addiction, just years of small failures piling on top of each other until there wasn't much left standing. The divorce finalized in February. The house sold in March. By April, I was sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment above a tire shop outside St. Louis and trying not to calculate how long my savings would last. I had worked industrial refrigeration for almost 12 years. Cold storage warehouses, food distribution centers, pharmaceutical facilities, the kind of places most people never think about. If you've ever bought frozen vegetables at a grocery store, people like me helped keep them frozen somewhere along the line. The pay wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Usually, the distribution hub that hired me sat near a freight rail junction on the edge of an industrial district. Massive facility, several connected buildings, hundreds of employees during daytime operations. At night, though, most of the place emptied out. Only security staff, logistics coordinators, and maintenance crews remained. My shift started at 6 in the evening and ended at 6 in the morning. 12 hours. 4 nights on, 3 nights off. Not ideal. But after 6 months of unemployment, I wasn't picky. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not actual silence. Industrial silence. The constant background hum of compressors, ventilation fans, pumps, electrical systems. The sounds become so familiar that your brain stops recognizing them individually. It turns into a single mechanical atmosphere. Like weather, the refrigeration archive occupied the oldest section of the facility, 3 levels underground, built decades before the rest of the distribution center expanded around it. Most of the storage rooms contained temperature-sensitive records, samples, agricultural specimens, and corporate inventory documentation. Not exciting. Mostly boxes, shelves, climate controls, routine maintenance. My supervisor's name was Greg. Late 50s. Thin, permanent coffee stain on every shirt he owned. The kind of man who looked exhausted even while standing still. During orientation, he walked me through equipment layouts, emergency procedures, maintenance schedules, and reporting systems. Everything seemed normal until we reached corridor C9. The hallway itself looked ordinary. Concrete walls, insulated doors, temperature sensors, nothing unusual. Greg stopped walking, pointed toward the corridor, then handed me a laminated card. Read Rule 7. There were 10 rules listed. Most made sense. Wear hearing protection. Log maintenance overrides. Report refrigerant leaks immediately. Normal stuff. Rule 7 was different. If an alarm originates from corridor C9, acknowledge the alert in the maintenance log and notify supervision. Do not enter corridor C9 in response to the alarm. That was it. No explanation. No safety warning. No technical reason. Just the instruction. I looked at Greg. He looked away. What? He took a sip of coffee. That's the procedure. What's in C9? Archived inventory. Then why not check the alarm? Greg shrugged. Because that's the procedure. I remember laughing. Not because it was funny. Because it felt like somebody was messing with a new guy. But nobody smiled. Nobody reacted. Greg simply continued walking. And the conversation ended there. At the time, I assumed there was a boring explanation. Maybe faulty sensors. Maybe legal issues. Maybe contamination concerns. Industrial workplaces accumulate weird policies over time. Most have stories behind them. I forgot about it for nearly 3 weeks. Then the first alarm happened. It was just after 2 in the morning. I was replacing a failed pressure sensor in one of the lower compressor rooms when my radio chirped. Maintenance alert. Corridor C9. Temperature deviation. I checked the monitor. The alarm indicator flashed red. Nothing dramatic. Just a standard notification. Instinctively, I grabbed my toolkit. Before I could leave, another maintenance worker named Kevin spoke over the radio. Log it and leave it. I frowned. What? Rule 7. Then silence. I remember staring at the monitor, waiting. The alarm continued flashing. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. Nobody responded. Nobody investigated. Eventually, the warning disappeared by itself. Like nothing had happened. The next morning, I checked the maintenance logs. There were dozens of previous entries. Every one identical. C. 9 temperature alert acknowledged. No action taken. Alert resolved. Some stretchback years. Thousands of entries. Always the same. No maintenance records. No repair notes. No investigation reports. Just acknowledgement. Nothing else. That should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I convinced myself there must be some technical explanation buried somewhere above my pay grade. Life was easier when I believed that. About a week later, I noticed something stranger. The work order system showed a completed maintenance request, submitted and resolved overnight. Inside corridor C9. According to the report, an evaporator motor had been replaced. The technician listed on the document was someone named Daniel Mercer. I didn't recognize the name, which wasn't unusual. Large facility, lots of employees, but when I mentioned him to Kevin during lunch, he looked confused. Who? Daniel Mercer? No idea. I checked payroll records later. No Daniel Mercer. Employee directory. Nothing. Security roster. Nothing. No contractor records either. The work order remained in the system. Everything about it looked legitimate, except the person who supposedly completed it didn't exist. That was the first time I felt genuine unease. Not fear, just the sense that something wasn't fitting together properly. And once I noticed it, more inconsistencies started appearing. Maintenance requests completed by employees nobody recognized. Equipment inspections signed by names missing from personnel databases. Inventory audits performed during hours when security cameras showed empty corridors. At first, I assumed database corruption. Software problems happened, but the anomalies kept accumulating. Slowly, methodically, always centered around C9. One night, I stayed late after shift change. I wanted to compare archived records. Nothing official, just curiosity. The oldest maintenance database dated back almost 15 years. I searched corridor C9. Thousands of entries appeared. Most were routine acknowledgments. Then I found something odd. Employee records. Names attached to maintenance reports. Dozens of them. Everyone impossible to verify. No hiring paperwork. No tax forms. No termination records. Nothing. Just evidence that they had worked there. Then stopped. The further back I searched, the more names I found. Some appeared hundreds of times, then vanished completely, as if entire employees had existed only inside maintenance documentation. That was when I found a recurring position title. Archive Response Technician. I never heard of it. Nobody had. The facility didn't officially employ anyone under that title. Yet records showed decades of work performed by people assigned to the role. Inspection reports, repairs, audits, equipment replacements, thousands of tasks, all completed by individuals who seemed to disappear afterward, and every one connected to corridor C9. I printed several records, took them home, spent hours reviewing them at my kitchen table. The pattern became impossible to ignore. The names changed, the handwriting changed, the years changed, but the job title remained. Archive Response Technician. Always singular, never more than one. Always assigned to C9. Always eventually disappearing from every other corporate record. I wish I could tell you I stopped investigating there. I didn't, because by then I needed answers. And because something else had started happening. My own name began appearing where it shouldn't. Not everywhere, just small places. An equipment checklist. A maintenance routing form. A calibration log I hadn't completed. Tiny errors. Easy mistakes. At least that's what I told myself. Until I found a work order sign with my employee ID. For a shift I had never worked. Inside corridor C9. And underneath my name was a position title I had never held. Archive Response Technician. That was the moment fear finally arrived. Not panic. Not terror. Something colder. The realization that whatever was happening had stopped being historical. It was becoming personal. And that was only the beginning. That I printed the work order and carried it around for 2 days. Folded in my jacket pocket. Every few hours I'd pull it out and read it again, hoping I'd spot some obvious explanation. A typo. A database sync error. Some administrative mistake. Instead, the details kept bothering me more. The timestamp matched a period when I had been asleep in my apartment. The task description referenced equipment I had never serviced. And the digital signature attached to the report was valid. Not copied, not forged. Valid. I know because I checked. The authentication log showed the report had been submitted using my credentials. No failed login attempts. No unauthorized access alerts. Just a clean submission from a terminal located underground. In corridor C9, I reported it. Not because I thought anyone would believe the entire story. Just the credential issue. That was serious enough. Corporate security opened an investigation. 3 days later, they closed it. No evidence of intrusion. No evidence of misuse. Case resolved. The report remained in the system. I asked for a copy of their findings. The security supervisor looked annoyed. Then he said something that stayed with me. You signed the report. No, I didn't. You understand that's not what the records show. The conversation went nowhere after that. It felt like arguing with a weather forecast. The data existed. Therefore, the conclusion existed. Reality didn't seem particularly important. After that, I started keeping my own records. Notebook, dates, times, photographs, screenshots, anything that felt unusual. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was trying to protect myself. The first truly alarming entry happened on a Tuesday night. 2:11 a.m. C9 alarm activation. Nothing unusual there. I acknowledged the alert, logged it, waited. Then another alarm appeared. This one wasn't connected to refrigeration equipment. It originated from an access control system. Door opened. Corridor C9. I checked the monitor. The door indicator showed someone entering. No badge information. No identity. Just an entry event. A few seconds later, another event appeared. Maintenance workstation login. User recognized. My name. I remember staring at the screen for several seconds. Then checking the time. 2:14 a.m. I was standing 3 floors away, holding a radio, looking directly at the system claiming I was somewhere else. The login session remained active for nearly 40 minutes. During that period, multiple work orders appeared. Equipment inspections, temperature audits, routine maintenance tasks, all completed under my credentials. I watched them happen in real time. I don't know why I didn't immediately quit. I've asked myself that question a lot. Part of it was money. Part of it was pride. Mostly, I think it was disbelief. When something impossible happens gradually enough, your brain keeps expecting the next piece of evidence to restore normality. You assume there's a misunderstanding waiting to be discovered, a hidden explanation, a missing detail. Instead, things became worse. The following week, several employees started mentioning conversations I couldn't remember having. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary workplace interactions. Kevin thanked me for helping him troubleshoot a compressor issue. I had no memory of helping him. A logistics coordinator mentioned advice I'd supposedly given her during lunch. Another employee referenced a conversation in a hallway. All normal, all believable, all completely absent from my memory. The unsettling part wasn't their certainty. It was the consistency. They described the same version of me. Helpful, polite, professional, always appearing near corridor C9, always working, always available. I began checking security footage whenever possible. That created a new problem. Sometimes I appeared on camera. Sometimes I didn't. One clip showed me entering a lower equipment room at 1:07 a.m., then leaving at 1:18. Perfectly normal. Another camera covering the connecting hallway showed no one entering or exiting during that period. The footage didn't match. Neither recording looked altered. Neither system reported errors. Both couldn't be true. Yet there they were. I started sleeping badly, maybe 2 or 3 hours at a time. The apartment felt smaller every day. The refrigerator hummed constantly. Traffic from the highway drifted through thin windows. Sometimes I'd wake up convinced somebody had spoken my name. Not loudly, just enough to pull me out of sleep. Nothing was ever there. I stopped mentioning most of it to other people. My sister already thought I was working too much. My ex-wife barely spoke to me anymore. There wasn't anyone else. So I kept documenting. Dates, times, records, patterns, and eventually a pattern emerged. Every unexplained entry associated with me contained a specific location code. AR1. At first I assumed it referenced equipment. Maybe an archive designation, a storage zone, anything. It took nearly 2 weeks to discover it wasn't a location. It was a position identifier. Archive Response Technician 1. The same title I had seen in historical records. The same title attached to dozens of missing employees. Once I understood that, I began tracing the old names more carefully. Not through corporate systems, through public records, tax databases, property records, social media, obituaries, anything available. Most names led nowhere. Dead ends, incomplete trails, but a few produced fragments. One man had owned a house 20 years earlier. Then the property transferred unexpectedly. No death certificate, no relocation records, nothing, just absence. Another appeared briefly in municipal employment databases before disappearing. A woman connected to records from the late 90s seemed to stop existing entirely after several years working at the facility. No closure, no explanation. Every trail ended the same way. Not death, not resignation, administrative evaporation, as though the world had gradually lost interest in remembering them. The realization hit me while sitting alone in the maintenance office around 4 in the morning. The facility wasn't creating fake employees. The employees had been real. Something happened afterward, something that reduced them to documentation. And now my name had joined the sequence. The first direct acknowledgement occurred 3 nights later. I was reviewing compressor diagnostics when a new work order appeared. Priority status. Immediate response required. Submitted from Corridor C9. Assigned technician me. I opened it. The task description contained only one sentence. Thank you for continuing your transition. I sat motionless for several seconds, reading it again and again. The work order format was genuine. The language wasn't. I printed the page, walked directly to Greg's office. He was drinking coffee and reviewing inventory reports. I placed the paper in front of him. Read this. He did. His expression didn't change, not even slightly. Then he folded the page, set it aside, and said something I still think about. You're reading too much into these things. I stared at him. Did you actually read it? Yeah. Then how are you not concerned? He rubbed his eyes, looked tired, more tired than usual. Then he said quietly, because eventually everybody gets one. I remember a strange feeling spreading through me. Not fear, recognition. Like hearing someone accidentally confirm a suspicion they'd spent months pretending not to understand. You knew. Greg didn't answer. That was answer enough. What happens to people assigned to that position? Still silence. Then finally, they stopped fighting it. I left without saying anything else. The next day, I requested access to archived personnel files. My authorization was denied. 2 hours later, my access permissions changed. Not reduced. Expanded. Entire sections of the archive system became available. Records I shouldn't have been able to view. Historical maintenance logs. Internal reports. Executive correspondence. Thousands of files. No approval notice. No explanation. Just access. And buried inside those files, I found something that terrified me more than any alarm. The company had been tracking the phenomenon for decades. Not studying it, managing it, containing it. Executives changed. Ownership changed. Facilities expanded. Yet references remained. Always vague. Always indirect. They called it continuity maintenance. No detailed explanation ever appeared. Only operational instructions. Do not interrupt active transition. Do not remove assigned personnel. Do not investigate source conditions within C9. Maintain documentation integrity. The oldest file dated back 43 years. A scanned memorandum. Poor quality. Nearly unreadable. One line remained clear. The role must remain occupied. Not the person. The role. That distinction haunted me because it implied the employee didn't matter. Only the position mattered. As if something inside Corridor C9 required a worker the same way a machine requires electricity. Replaceable, interchangeable, necessary. Around that time, the dreams started. Not nightmares. Work dreams. The kind people have after long shifts. Walking corridors, checking equipment, completing inspections, signing forms. Normal things. Except every dream ended the same way. A door at the end of C9 opening slowly, and someone standing inside. Not threatening, not aggressive. Working, clipboard in hand, maintenance uniform, head down, writing. I never saw their face, but I always knew they expected me to take their place. The worst part was waking up with details I shouldn't know. Equipment serial numbers, maintenance schedules, inventory locations, information that later proved accurate. Information I had never learned consciously. The boundary between my work and whatever was happening inside that corridor was beginning to dissolve. And somewhere deep down, I think the system knew I had finally understood what it wanted from me. Because after months of indirect pressure, the invitation stopped. The assumptions stopped. The paperwork stopped pretending. The next work order contained only 4 words. Your shift begins tomorrow. I didn't go to work the next day. For the first time since being hired, I called in sick. Not because I was sick, because I was scared. I sat in my apartment all morning listening to trucks pass on the road below. My phone stayed on the kitchen table. Every vibration made me jump. I expected angry calls, warnings, threats. Instead, nothing happened. No messages, no emails, no disciplinary notice. Just silence. Around noon, I logged into the employee portal. My attendance record showed I had reported for duty. Clocked in at 5:58 a.m. Clocked out at 11:41 a.m. 6 productive work hours. No absences. No discrepancies. I refreshed the page 3 times. Same result. The system believed I had worked. And somewhere, according to the records, I apparently had. I drove to the facility anyway. Not for my shift. I wanted answers. The parking lot looked normal. Forklifts moving. Trailers backing into loading bays. Employees smoking near designated areas. The ordinary rhythm of an ordinary workplace. I walked straight to human resources. The woman behind the desk looked up and smiled. Back already? I stopped. What do you mean? You left a little while ago. My stomach tightened. I haven't been here. She frowned, not suspiciously, confused. Then she turned her monitor toward herself and clicked through something. That's strange. I waited. A few seconds later, she looked even more confused. Your badge was used this morning. I didn't answer. She kept searching. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. Weird. What? The photo attached to the entry log isn't loading. I left before she could ask more questions. Not because I had learned anything useful, because I suddenly felt exposed. Like I was already arguing with a version of reality that had decided I was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I opened my notebook and started organizing everything chronologically. Names, records, dates, missing employees, system changes, security anomalies. The longer I worked through it, the clearer one fact became. The timeline wasn't random. Each previous archive response technician followed roughly the same progression. Unauthorized records, identity overlap, expanded permissions, independent work documentation, then administrative migration. That was the term used in several internal files. Migration, not resignation, not termination. Migration. One employee disappeared from payroll while simultaneously appearing in archival maintenance systems. Another ceased existing in human resources databases, but continued generating work reports for nearly 7 years. I read those files repeatedly, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding them. Then I found something even worse. One technician had apparently remained active for 19 years after his official employment ended. 19 years. Equipment inspections, maintenance reports, inventory verification, thousands of documented tasks. No payroll, no address, no emergency contact, no tax records. Just work, endless work. The realization hit me slowly. Whatever occupied the role wasn't leaving. It kept operating, long after the person should have been gone. I closed my laptop, walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, and stared at my reflection. Exhausted, unshaven, 39 years old, ordinary. Yet for the first time in my life, I wasn't completely sure I existed in the same way I had a year earlier. The thought sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. I know that, but that's honestly where my head was. Because every piece of evidence suggested something impossible. Not replacement, not duplication, redistribution. Parts of me were appearing elsewhere. Inside systems, inside records, inside routines. The next morning, I made a decision. I was leaving, Not quitting, leaving. Immediately, I packed clothes, gathered important documents, loaded my truck. My plan wasn't complicated. Drive south, stay with my brother for a while, figure things out later. At noon, I stopped for gas about 40 miles from the city. While paying, I checked my phone. One new email. Corporate maintenance system. Automatic notification. Work order completed. Assigned technician me. Location, corridor C9. Timestamp, 11 minutes earlier. I was standing in a gas station. Yet, according to the facility, I was underground performing maintenance. I deleted the email. A few minutes later, another appeared. Then another. Then another. By sunset, there were 17. All completed. All signed. All mine. I stopped reading them. For 3 days I drove. Different motels. Different highways. Different towns. The emails continued. Every few hours another arrived. Sometimes routine maintenance. Sometimes inventory inspections. Sometimes reports with no task description at all. Only timestamps and signatures. Mine. Always mine. On the 4th day, I reached my brother's house in Arkansas. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. He immediately commented on how tired I looked. I lied, told him work had been stressful. That explanation satisfied him. For a while. The first strange thing happened 2 nights later. His daughter asked me a question during breakfast. Completely innocent. Do you work underground? I nearly dropped my coffee. Why? She shrugged. You said so yesterday. I hadn't. I was certain. My brother laughed. Actually, you did. I looked at him. What? You mentioned it while we were talking outside. No, I didn't. He frowned, then gave me the same look everyone eventually gave me. The look people use when they think you're forgetting things. I changed the subject. But later that day, I checked my phone. There was a voicemail. Timestamp during the exact conversation my brother remembered. The recording contained my voice, discussing underground maintenance operations, explaining archive systems, talking casually, normally, like an ordinary conversation. I listened to it 6 times. I had no memory of making it. The voice was mine. The mannerisms were mine. The pauses were mine. But the speakers sounded occupied, focused, like someone discussing work they had performed for years. That was when I understood distance wasn't helping. Whatever was happening wasn't attached to the facility anymore. Maybe it never had been. A week later, I stopped receiving work orders. At first, that felt like progress. Relief. Then I noticed something worse. The emails had been replaced by performance reviews, monthly evaluations, supervisor comments, attendance reports, promotion recommendations. The system no longer treated me like an employee. It treated me like a long-term staff member. Established, trusted, permanent. I wasn't being recruited anymore. I was being documented. One evening I logged into the portal using credentials that somehow still worked. What I found nearly made me sick. My employment history had changed. Years of records now existed. Training certifications I never completed. Performance evaluations stretching back nearly a decade. Archived photographs from company events. Group pictures. Safety meetings. Award ceremonies. In every image I appeared somewhere in the background. Not prominently, just present. As though I had always worked there. As though my entire life had quietly reorganized itself around a job I only held for a few months. I downloaded everything. Every file. Every photograph. Every report. Then I printed copies. Boxes of them. Partly because I wanted evidence. Partly because I was terrified they might disappear. Some did. Within weeks, several files became inaccessible. Others changed. Dates shifted. Metadata updated. But the printed copies remained. Physical proof that reality, or at least documentation, had not always looked this way. The final thing happened about 6 months after I left Missouri. I wish I could say it provided answers. Instead, it removed the last possibility that this was all some elaborate bureaucratic error. I received a package. No return address. No shipping information. Just a plain cardboard box. Inside was a maintenance logbook. Old, worn, cold to the touch despite sitting on my porch all afternoon. The first pages contained entries from decades ago. Names I recognized from the missing personnel records. Dates. Equipment inspections. Routine notes. Thousands of hours of work. Then I reached the final section. The handwriting changed. The name at the top of the page was mine. The entries described tasks completed over the previous several months. Tasks I had never performed, but now they weren't electronic. They were handwritten, page after page after page, and the handwriting matched my own perfectly. The final entry occupied the last sheet. Just one sentence. Shift transfer complete. Underneath was a signature. Mine. There was no next page. No explanation. Nothing else. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time holding that book, listening to the refrigerator cycle on and off, listening to distant traffic, trying to decide whether I still had a choice. Because the truth is, I don't know what became of the people before me. I don't know what exists inside Corridor C9. I don't know whether the role creates the worker or the worker creates the role. I don't know if some part of me is still there, working, maintaining, recording, continuing. Why to know is this? Every few months, another package arrives, always without a return address, always containing maintenance logs, and every new volume documents work completed after the previous one ended. The handwriting remains mine. The signatures remain mine. The tasks continue. Thousands of pages now fill shelves in my apartment. Years of labor performed by someone who shouldn't exist. Someone who never takes vacation, never misses a shift, never stops working. Last week I opened the newest book. The final page wasn't completed yet. Most entries stopped several months ahead of the current date. This one extended further, nearly 2 years into the future. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And near the end, I found a maintenance note. Brief, routine, exactly the sort of thing that appears hundreds of times throughout the logs. Except for one detail. The task location wasn't Corridor C9. It was my current apartment address. And according to the entry, whoever has been signing my name is scheduled to arrive here next month.